Welcome to another Strange Journeys. Tonight we're going to take a strange journey into the possible connections between Cherokee legends and the iconic Ark of the Covenant.
Do you want to take a trip into the unknown, into the unseen, the unexplainable, and the unbelievable? Join our strange journeys. Are you ready?
Hello again, folks. I am Tom, your ghost host. That is the ghost guy, Tim, and back with us for a while. It's been a while. Selena is
Hello.
down there, one of the ETs. She's finally able to be back with us. We appreciate you being here, the watchers. Um, Selena, you were kind of laughing a little bit during that intro. Had you not seen it before?
I hadn't seen that one. No, I didn't.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I tried to get pictures that were flattering to everybody.
I thought maybe she was laughing because I was over here. He goes, "Are you ready?" And I'm going,
Oh, well, there could have been that too. So,
"Right."
all right, we're going to get into the show here in a second, but first, a little bit of housekeeping. Remember that we provide these shows first and foremost for you, the watchers, for your entertainment, and we're not by any means and do not claim to be scholars or experts on any of the topics we cover. We are simply enthusiasts and storytellers who have fun with these topics while doing our best to respect individual beliefs. And please remember, this show is live and nothing is rehearsed or edited out later. What you see is what you get. The only exception to that right now is our revisited shows, which right now we're in season 2 of the revisit edits, where and guys, I've been, I mean, y'all know I've been going through a lot with my mom and her care and everything, and that's no excuse other than my brain has been a little addled, and I I had been doing the revisit shows by uploading them to this service here, which only allowed us an hour, and then it was broadcasting at a specific time on YouTube. And it hit me one day last week, why don't I just upload them to YouTube? Then I have no limits. I'm like, duh. so so I've been doing that, which I already had several of them edited to the hour, less than an hour. So that's how they're going up on YouTube. But after the next 2 or 3 shows, then they're just going to go up the whole show with the revisit intro and closing so that everybody knows it's a revisit. But so for the next couple of shows, you get to split part one and part two. So, because it just didn't even click. I'm like, if I'm not uploading to this service, I could just go straight to YouTube. Whoopee. So anyway, all right. Speaking of the revisit show, the last one. Whoops, I did that wrong in the notes. Yeah, no, I didn't. The last one that just went up, I put it up a couple of days ago. It's all about the boom boom. parts 1 and 2, where we talk about those mysterious booms, and we found records of them throughout history.
Right.
Where they said it sounded like thunder, and but there was no clouds and this kind of thing. I mean, it's happening, and there's no seismological event. There's no meteorological event. There's no aircraft in the area that could break the sound barrier. It's just these things are happening, and from all investigations, there is nothing to cause it, which we obviously know there is. But anyway, that was the last one we did. So it's up in our revisit playlist now. You can watch parts 1 and parts 2, where we show a lot of video clips of news cast. These things make the evening news. That's what's amazing about it. And the next show is 40 Wax, the Lizzie Borden story. So get ready for that one. I'll be uploading that probably this weekend. But our last live show, Dagny was here with me, was where we had gotten Tim and did his show where he talked about stories from his tours, Ravenwind. And he spent time doing that. And then the next show after that was Strange LaGrange, where Lewis Powell came on and shared stories. Those were amazing shows. And Tim, you weren't here to acknowledge this, but I'm sure you didn't get through, basically. You didn't have time to share all your stories. Well, Lewis the same way. The same way. We went through a bunch of stories, but then at about an hour and 45 minutes, we're like, okay, it's time to shut it down. And the same thing with our last show, which was the original tour that started this show, the walking tour in Mobile, Alabama, called Strange Journeys. And we titled the show Where This All Began. And I went through some of the major stories that we used on the tour, and actually had some new updates. So Selena, if you'd been on the tour several times, so you knew most of the stories. Well, there was actually some updates on a couple of the stories. So that was cool to be able to share that, because I'd share it on tour and I just tell the story. But now we've got a couple of updates, which were pretty cool, which one I'll tell you about, because this was so hilarious to me. We told the story of Patricia Krenwinkel, who was part of the Manson family that was actually part of the Tate, murdered Sharon Tate. And my mind's going blank on the other family that she murdered the next night. Well, the family did. She was one of the ones holding the knife. Anyway, she has been the oldest, longest-serving female inmate in the California penal system. Still there to this day. However, she came up for parole in May and was granted parole.
Wow.
Well, it wasn't too long. As a matter of fact, about a week before we actually did the show, Governor Newsom said not just no, but hell no.
Right.
He rescinded the parole. Basically said she does not need to be out on the streets. I thought it was just amazing that it happened just as we were getting ready for the show.
Oh, cool.
So anyway, so go back and watch that. Also, there was a UFO sighting that I used to tell about on the show, and I had the witness, the experiencers, hand-drawn depictions of the ship. And since then, because like I've told you before, my computer that had all my tour notes and script died. I've lost everything, but I remembered everything. But I just went back and did some cursory research to refresh my memory on some of the details. And when I did, I found this one UFO sighting where the woman had hand-drawn it. She gave it to a graphic artist, and they have come up with a computer rendering, and it is amazing. And it's just wild, kind of like the the ship that you found, the astronaut had gotten the
Right,
artist rendering on, and that my
right,
father-in-law recognized it and see that's the one I saw. So
right.
anyway,
Which was like the coolest thing to see because here's this astronaut with like this drawing of what he says he saw from the space
yes,
station, and you're like,
yes,
that's exactly what my father-in-law saw.
yes. I mean, when he saw the picture, he was like, "That's it. That's what I
Right,
saw." And when you
exactly.
saw his hand drawings, you're like, yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
it.
yeah, well, all right. Well, we're gonna try to get moved on. I mean, I get excited telling about all that stuff. Y'all know that. But anyway, you are watching on YouTube, and we appreciate it.
Click that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.
Thumbs up, subscribe, the bell for notifications, and
Right.
while you're at it, share the video. It's up in our Strange Friends page because about a half hour before the show, I posted a link to this show. So anybody in our Strange Friends group can just click on that and be watching the show with us. So, and remember, if you want to help us produce the show, there we got several different ways. You can go to patreon.com and become a patron as little as $3 a month. And we've got a few patrons, but not a lot yet. And we really need some more so we can keep doing this. It'd be nice to get a lot more. Maybe we could actually officially get some paying sponsors. Wouldn't that be cool? Our sponsors in the past were just people we were helping out. Let's just do
Right.
you a little commercial, but nobody paid us. But that's cool because we did it because we wanted to. But you can go to patreon.com/strange journey. Sign up for as little as $3. There's 3, 5, 10, 25, something like that. There's even one on there that's like, well, for each level, you get a different kind of swag. You get a sticker, you get a coffee mug, you get a T-shirt. But there's a ultimate level. I think it's like $35 a month, 35, 40. I don't remember. I'd have to go back and look. Where you get all the swag. So after you've been a patron for 3 months, you get all the swag. So that, I mean, that's the way it works with all the levels. You help support for 3 months, then you get your swag. But we have some other things. If you're not comfortable with a monthly commitment, we understand that and not upset at all. You can go to paypal.me/strange journeys. You can go to Venmo @strange journeys, or you can do Cash App $strange journeys. And you can basically just tip the show, which that would be awesome if you want to. Um, so there used to be a thing called digital tip jar. I think it's defunct now, but I used to use that in some of my live shows, saying, "Hey, if you don't have cash,
Right. You know.
just go to this link." So anyway, and the other way you can support us is through strangestuff.live, which you can get your Watchers T-shirt, a pillow, mug, different kind of stuff. There's a logo T-shirt, just all kind of stuff. So now tonight's show is a little different. It is strange, folks, and this is a strange journey we're taking. Some of you may not have ever heard of some of this. Tim's more has done more research into it than I have. I've done a little bit, so I'll be sticking my nose in every now and then, or maybe asking him a question. But this is a subject that has intrigued me and captivated me the past couple of days, where I'm just like, wow, I'd never heard some of this. I'd heard some things similar, but never really heard some of this. So, Tim, tell us more about this Cherokee people.
As we get into this, I'll give you a little bit of background about this. If you're one of our regular watchers, you may have already figured out by now that I have a fascination with Native American culture. Um, I can honestly say I probably don't have any Native American blood in my um, heritage, even though my grandmother said that her grandkids were all related to Sitting Bull. I've never been able to figure that one out, you know. But are you hearing me? Because I'm not sure you're hearing me. Okay. this is a fun thing with this wonderful cold that I had.
No,
Um,
I muted our mic so we could hear you better.
okay, in the earliest portion of my life, I actually grew up in a little town in the White Mountains of Arizona, part of the White Mountain Apache Indian Reservation, and my grandmother lived about 4 blocks away. She loved the native people there, did everything that she could to help them and learn more about them. Over the years, she collected pottery and kachina dolls, burden baskets, huge amounts more. She was actually listed as one of the Friends of the Apache and a friend of the Navajo, which, in order for those two societies to really accept you as part of them, is kind of a unique situation. Because of this relationship that I had with her, I kind of developed that passage for the Native Americans and their history as well and their legends that go on. There is one thing that has always fascinated me, though, and it's become a bit of an obsession over the last probably 20 years of my life. It actually starts a long time ago in the Petrified Forest Painted Desert area in Arizona. In the midst of the park is actually a petroglyph that sits on the side of a rock. The rock itself is tilted um, so that this petroglyph actually sits on the under edge of this particular rock. It's actually a large rectangular object. It has two triangular objects that are above it. There is a man to one side of it, and archaeologists believe that where the rock has been chiseled away, there actually used to be another man standing there. Uh, as I learned more about the object, I often wondered what it was. Many archaeologists believe that the defacing of the rock has caused that man to disappear, but they've also learned that there's an old Pueblo legend that goes back several hundred years ago about a group of Native Americans who came from afar, came through the area carrying a golden box with two winged creatures sitting upon it. They stopped somewhere near this location for a short time, and the people living there observed lightning flashes coming
Wow.
from the edges of the box. So much so that those that carried the box used long wooden poles to carry it.
Well,
They
that does sound familiar.
It does
Um,
sound familiar, doesn't it?
yeah, I wanted to go back to that picture. The man looks a little out of proportion. Is
He definitely is. Um, but actually, if you get down inside, you can't get very close to a lot of these particular
right,
petroglyphs.
right.
Lots of it is out of proportion. You've got in
Okay.
different areas of the rocks here, you have deer that are larger than people. Um, you've got serpents that are huge. In fact, there's a story about a
Yeah.
guy who gets lost in the painted desert probably 40, 50 years ago. And
Mm.
his way of getting out is he finds one of these petroglyphs that is a serpent um, that tells him exactly which canyons he needs to go through.
Oh boy.
There's actually, yeah, somebody has drawn arrows next to each turn of the serpent as it winds its way up through the rock. And that's actually how
Huh.
he finds his way back out, which I think is kind of cool to have occurred. Um,
Well, on the right hand side of that, you can see a discoloration in the lighter color, like
yeah,
the surface got knocked off or something.
yeah. Over the years, there's been lots of people that have, until about probably the early 2000s, this portion of the national park was not, you weren't able to visit it. There wasn't a road going here. In order
Oh,
to get here, you had to hike in to this part. Now the road, they've actually turned it so it heads directly towards where these petroglyphs are because they want people to see them. And there are hundreds of petroglyphs in this particular area.
right.
Um, and you're talking about an area that's maybe about 100 square feet. I mean, it's not a very big area, but there are just hundreds of
Really?
carvings in the rocks. This one here is probably about 2 feet wide. I mean, it's not very wide at all, by about a foot tall, and then you add probably another 6 to 8 inches on for whatever the triangular object is on
The,
top of that.
that you're saying small, but I mean, to me, that's big.
It is.
If you're saying 2 feet by 1 foot,
Yeah,
that's a pretty good
you know,
carving into the rock.
yeah. Compared
I
to
mean,
some
there's no
here,
perspective in
it's
this
much smaller,
picture.
right? Yeah, you don't get a lot of really good perspective in this one, just because of where this one is at. This is a picture I took in, I want to say 2010 or 2012 when I was there,
Wow,
because I wanted
wow.
another picture of it. And at the time, part of the other man on the opposite side of this box was still visible. He has since disappeared.
Mm. Wow. Wow. So the legend states that they were carrying a golden box with poles.
With poles, had some kind of winged creature atop it, and then they stayed in this particular area for only a short period of time, and then they carried the box into the depths of what we now call Grand Canyon National Park, and it never gets
Oh,
seen again. There is a legend, and I think part of the reason that really sunk me into this is that one of my favorite movies still today is Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I refer to this one on tours as well. The wax mannequins melting, but the
yeah.
idea that the Ark of the Covenant is still out there and that people are looking for it still fascinates
Yeah,
me.
but if you've watched the movie, you know where it is. Kinda.
It- Kind of.
It's in
We'll
that
get into
warehouse.
lots of different stories about the Ark. Tom, I know that you grew up like me with this as the son of a minister. I have a degree in pastoral ministries, is where my bachelor's degree is in. Has spent lots of time studying the Ark of the Covenant throughout the course of the Bible and what goes on with it. Um, and so here, according to the Bible, it says golden box.
Right.
Um, you're talking somewhere in the range of about 4 foot by 3 foot is what the estimated was. I mean, it's not a very big box, comparatively made almost completely out of gold. That is acacia wood covered in gold that they carried.
I was
Um,
thinking acacia wood. That was running through my brain.
Right. And what happens is they take this particular box, and it's supposed to be the seat of God. Anytime the tabernacle sets down where it is, God is supposed to come down and sit right in the middle of the two angels that are atop of the two cherubim. Um,
Right.
History tells us that it disappears somewhere around when the Babylonians sacked Israel, about 587 BC. How and it disappears forever. There's lots of different stories behind that. Some historians actually place it almost 200 years earlier, somewhere around the age of 750 BC, which we'll get into because that's when the 12 tribes of or the 10 tribes of Israel disappear,
Right.
and they're never seen again during that first sack of Jerusalem by the Babylonians at that point. Um, and I know that I'm not alone in the idea of the Ark of the Covenant being out there because there's lots of different stories behind this thing. Um, there's those that claim that it was transported to Ethiopia, and the Ethiopians today still claim that the Ark of the Covenant is in Ethiopia, that
Right.
they um, and that they have made additional copies of it because it is this revered object, and so they've distributed
Wow.
throughout. They've got one temple where it's supposed where this one is supposed to be. The priest that is assigned to that temple never leaves the temple during the course of his life. He's usually appointed to be priest over this temple at about the age of 25 and will stay there
Right.
until he dies, which
Which
is,
we were talking the other day was not very long.
um, it depends on the current one. They're saying he is 97 years old.
Oh, really?
Has been in that temple for more than 70 years.
Okay,
So,
because I had heard something where they didn't live very long,
yeah,
being
lots
that
of them
close
don't
to it.
survive very long. This one here has been around a
Yeah.
long time, which really is kind of a neat situation. Other
Yeah.
stories claim that the Knights Templar find it underneath the Temple of Solomon
Yeah.
when
Heard
they're
that.
digging inside the Temple Mountain, that they take it to France. And then eventually, when the Knights Templar are overthrown, it makes its way to Scotland and then to the United States, or at least to North America, because
Right.
there are the whole treasure hunt in Oak Island. Part of what they believe may be down there is the Ark of the Covenant.
That's one of their theories. Yes.
Right. That's one of the theories that the Knights Templar transported the Ark of the Covenant and that it's buried on Oak Island someplace, whether or not that's true or not. Um,
It
there's a
makes a good suspenseful TV show
right. It
because
does,
they
and
don't
where
find anything. It's been what,
right
10 seasons and they've never
where,
found anything. I don't know. I don't watch it. I don't know.
where 10 seasons in, they find lots of little pieces that might
Yeah.
be related to a major
Oh, that could
treasure,
be this. Yeah.
but there's
Exactly.
no proof that any of it is related to a major treasure. And the only piece of evidence that they come up with that dates it to that time period as a sword that is a Roman gladius, but it's a reproduction piece made about 100 years.
A
So,
Hollywood prop.
right, basically. Uh, in
I
the
don't mean to diss the show. Those guys are well intent and they're knowledgeable, or they wouldn't be able
right,
to do this. But
right,
it's just, to me, it's one of those things like Josh Gates. You know, I
right,
love Josh Gates. I love watching him, but they never find anything.
right,
What they're going out there for, they never find. I mean, one time I think they found a beer can. You know,
right. Yeah,
they did find a Nazi coin there in
right,
Brazil. I think it was. They
right,
were digging in the yard of Hitler's. Uh, Supposedly Hitler's home base there in Rio, and they did find a Nazi coin that, and they found another couple of few trinkets and stuff, but
right, right.
I
Exactly. Um,
I don't mean to
Chris,
make fun of those shows. They are
oh,
much bigger budget than we are
right,
and can afford to do that. We can't.
right, exactly. Another story about the Ark of the Covenant that fascinates me at this point is that there are books that are actually written about the time period that the Bible is written that may or may not have originally been intended to be included in the Bible. They include First and Second Maccabees, as well as several other books. In the Catholic Bible, those are still included as
Mhm.
as books that are real. These are real books. Christian Bibles don't believe that. In Second Maccabees, there's a story about how the prophet Jeremiah, in preparation for the invasion in 587 BC, takes the Ark of the Covenant to a cave outside of Jerusalem somewhere, and that the ground swallows it up, and Jeremiah goes back and says it will never be seen again.
Wow.
Um, no, I don't know how true that is or not. Like I said, he just says God caused the ground to swallow it. It's gone. We're never going to see it again. You might as well give up. Um,
Well, he had to do something because people are not going to believe him.
right. You
People are going to go out there and look for it anyway. So he had to have done something with it. I mean, the apocryphal books have always intrigued me. I've read some of it. Haven't read it, especially the Book of Enoch.
right,
Um, that's probably the most popular of
right,
the apocryphal books. And see, this goes back to, and I'm going to say something here that's extremely controversial because this is was um, I King James selected 12 men to decide on the 88 books of the Bible. What Not only was King James one of the most wicked and evil kings that ever lived, um, in which I understand God can use evil people for his own design and his own purposes. But, who were those 12 men? And they set up these books and they took those apocryphal books and said, no, those are not holy.
right,
I don't get that. I really don't understand that. And there's been no explanation as to why they chose these specific books other than to say they believe it was the word of God. From what I've learned, God can speak through the Bible. He can speak through Reader's Digest. He can speak through Tim's book, The Haunted Prairie. You know, if God wants to talk to you, he's going to talk to you.
through a donkey.
Exactly.
Right.
That's my whole point about the apocryphal books. Some people um, get stuff out of them, but just to say, no, we can't read that. That's not of God. How do you know?
Right.
Who are we to say? And I'm sorry, I got off on a little soapbox there. I shouldn't do that. I don't want to offend anybody. I do respect. I mean, you and I came from the same background. I mean, that's the King James was the Word of God. You know,
Exactly. You know.
and so and if you believe that way, I respect that. I just don't see that is the only Word of God. That's just me. I could be wrong. We could all be wrong. All right, I'm sorry. I'm off my soapbox
No,
now.
that's all right.
I stepped down off the soapbox.
All of this studying of looking for between learning about the Native American cultures and learning more about the Ark of the Covenant has led to long discussions with my dad. That minister that has been in the ministry. Like I said, he was pastor for 33, well, chaplain for 33 years of his
Wow.
life. That's a huge amount of time to do that. And so he and I have had lots of discussions about that. And I personally believe that there are things out there that we don't know all the answers to. I believe in
Exactly.
ghosts. I believe in Bigfoot. I believe in puckwudgies, even though of those three I've only experienced one. But so it makes sense to me that the Ark of the Covenant may still be out there. And then but what happens is that I think honestly it disappears before the 587 date. I think it disappears around 722, and the Jews cover it up for years when the 10 tribes of Israel vanished from history. And what really drew me back into this is we got into the episode on the Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts. I know that
Right.
you were missing for that one, which
Yeah.
devolved a 30-minute discussion on puckwudgies.
I went into puckwudgies. That's why it led me to do a show on puckwudgies later on. But yeah, I sat back. I was with my son in the hospital, so I went back and
Right,
watched that. Love
right.
that show.
And one of the things that catches my attention is what is called the Dighton Rock in
Yes.
Massachusetts. It is part of the Bridgewater Triangle. Um, it's a brownish gray sandstone rock that stands approximately 5 feet tall, 10 feet wide, and 11 feet long. It's a massive rock that used to sit out in the middle of a river. It weighs in
Right.
around 5 tons. It is not a small or lightweight rock. It's a
Well, when
big
Scott Walter was investigating it, it was in the river on his show America Unearthed.
right. And then he went back later to see it a second time, and they
Oh
had
yeah.
drug it out of the river. It's not sitting in a river anymore.
Right.
They're trying to preserve this thing because even going back as far as 1690, there's actually a Reverend Cotton Mather who talks about this rock. He says, among the curiosities of New England is that of a mighty rock on a perpendicular side of a river, which at high tide covers part of it. There are very deeply engraved, no man alive knows how or when, strange
Wow.
characters
Yeah.
which suggests as odd thoughts about them were here before us as they were as there are odd shapes in the elaborate monument. Um, and I was like, this is really incredible as we're reading it because there were lots of things that they talked about with this. One of those is that there's Cherokee writing on this. Cherokees ranged anywhere from Alabama to North Carolina was
Right.
was their native lands.
I
So
didn't realize there were Cherokee writing on it.
there's Cherokee writing on it. There's also what they believe
Hmm.
to be Phoenician writing on it. Um, the Phoenicians were sailors prior to 1 BC or 1
Right.
AD. These guys have been around for years. They would sail across all kinds of places, but there's Phoenician writing on it. There's Chinese letters on it. There's Portuguese writing, Native American petroglyphs, Norse runes, and what they believe to be the Ark of the Covenant carved into the rock.
Wow. I
Now,
remember you talking about that.
I asked the lady to send it, and this is the image that she sent me. Where inside that circle is what they believe to be the Ark of the Covenant. This was when it was still in the river. They can't get a good enough image of this thing at all at this point. Um, the
I thought they
reason
had at one time.
they did at one point, but really what it is it's etchings. Different
Yeah.
people etchings over the top of the rock. There are multiple layers of carvings across this rock. They figured out at this
Okay.
point that the carvings date as far back as about 1,200 years ago. A
Wow.
massive amount of time period that they've carved over the top of this rock, one layer on top. Even
Holy
when Scott
cow.
Walter got a chance to look at this, they were only allowing him to look at the very first layer of carvings, and he's saying these carvings are probably about 600 to 800 years old. And he goes, "What's below it is older than that. There's no way that it's not." But they won't let anybody really look to see how deep these carvings are or exactly what is on there. Um, but I just thought it was fascinating that here again we're looking at the Ark of the Covenant popping up. One of
Right.
the entries that I was able to find actually does show that that is a square box or a rectangular box
I
that
can
is
kind of
there.
see it.
Yeah, that is inside that circle that has got two triangles on top of it, but the triangles are normal shaped triangles, like mountains or something. And so it's
Yeah.
like, okay, it's kind of like, wow, this is great. You know, uh, but to me, it was like, okay, well, let's really look at what's going on here. Um, and what happens is that they turn to a guy by the name of John Danforth, that he is able to recognize the Cherokee writing as well. He just can't decipher
Mhm.
what it says. He says, "You're not. There's no doubt in my mind that this is Cherokee, and it makes no sense that it's this far north,
Right.
especially if you're looking at 1,000 to 1,200 years old." He goes, "No, the Cherokee writing, according to certain sources, Cherokee writing dates to 1819. Is the earliest time we have a form of
Oh,
Cherokee.
come on.
That's what they claim." I was like, "No, you got to be kidding me. How in the world did you come up with that particular number, 1819? That doesn't
Yeah.
make any sense because this is one of the oldest tribes in the country, and you're claiming that they've been here for only a few years." Um, and so
No.
what happens is that as we get into this, there's a lot of discussion on who the Cherokee really are and
You
where
know,
they
I'm
come from.
back to what you were saying, 1819. You know what I think it is? I think
But
it is that was when the white man gave them their language,
that could be.
which
Um,
they had language and writings before that, but it's not accepted because the white man didn't put his stamp on it and say, "Hey,
right.
you have language now." That's
Now,
just a personal opinion.
right. And I think too, though, that it may date to a much closer date to us in history, and that being 1971. And we'll get into. We're going to talk about the crap. What is the name of the stone now? The Bat Creek Stone. Here,
Oh,
in just a few
yeah.
minutes. But we'll talk about the Bat Creek Stone because in 1971 they claim the writing on that they believe is Cherokee writing is not because the historian or archaeologist that is allowed to look at it says, "Oh no, it can't be Cherokee writing. It's got to be Hebrew writing, and it's
Mhm.
a forgery because Cherokee writing didn't exist until 1819."
Yeah. And they that the ones they call the holy stones?
Yeah, that's one of the ones they're calling the Holy Stones.
Yeah, they excavated this Cherokee Indians
Right.
chieftain's grave, and they found the box with those stones in it,
Yes, exactly.
and which the guy said it was Hebrew. But
Right.
to back up to the Dighton stone, where you said there was all these different languages on there,
Right.
I could be wrong on this, but I seem to remember one of the documentaries I saw said that Phoenician writing was the forerunner to the Hebrew language. Is that correct?
It is. It is. Um,
Okay.
what happens is that at some point or another, the Phoenicians and the Hebrews existed in the same area.
Right.
The Hebrews move north into what we now know as Israel. The Phoenicians move west and wind up somewhere around the area of Spain, and they become world-renowned sailors. These guys sailed
Right.
everywhere.
Right.
Um, we know that they've got maps going as far north as what we now consider Iceland. They had maps going down the coast of Africa and around the Horn of Africa, which is one of the most dangerous places to sail.
Right.
And they would come all the way up as far as North Africa in the area of Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia. So they were sailing way more than they should have been.
Right. Well,
Uh,
there's supposedly evidence of the Phoenicians all over the world that they,
yeah,
they got out of
there's
town a good bit.
archaeological evidence that these guys were in Australia, that they were in
Yeah.
and we're talking before Christ. These guys were everywhere, uh, which really brings us to the idea of who the
Oh,
Cherokees are. Um,
right. I wanted to back up again before we
Sure.
go further. Something that is like I knew this, but I didn't. I'd never really thought about it. But the difference between the Hebrews and the Jews,
Right.
where you were talking about the Israelites moved to the north, and
Right.
that was basically
The 12
the
tribe.
other tribe. Yeah, but the Jews, the tribe of Judah, stayed in the south,
Right.
and they were the kingdom of Judah, which
Right.
we get our abbreviation
But
Jews. Now, I am not qualified to speak on this. There are others that are more qualified, but I mean, I've known that for years that the Jews were basically from the tribe of Judah,
right.
and so it's the other ones that are missing, and
And
they had their own kingdom. They had
right.
split at some point.
Right. And they wind up being the two tribes. Okay. So when you're talking
Right.
about the two tribes, you're talking about King David's tribe as well as Benjamin's tribe. And
Mhm.
so those are the two tribes that we know still exist today. The
Right.
rest of them vanished around 722 BC. 10 tribes, hundreds of thousands of people just gone.
Right.
And nobody knows where they go. There's no record as to where they go. We don't know, if they wind up, we know some of them get hauled off to Babylon. But what
Hmm.
happens to them when they get to Babylon? We've never really been, history has never really been able to tell us that. Um, However, the Cherokee in particular claim to come from a kingdom far across the Great Sea, and they're referring to the Atlantic Ocean.
Well,
We
yeah.
came from that way. We were brought here by some other group, and they brought us to this country, and here we are. They can't put an
Mhm.
exact date. They place themselves somewhere around coming to North America somewhere around 3,000 years ago,
Right.
which puts us almost at about the right time period that the 10 tribes just disappeared. Uh, and so what happens is that as they've claimed this all these years, they've got lots of legends that they begin to tell. And so we'll talk about some of their legends that tie in with the Israelites in particular, with those 10 tribes that disappeared, because they've got lots of things that happen. And I know
Yeah.
that you pointed out a book, and we'll talk a little bit about that book because that book is one of the earliest points. Um, However, just a few years ago, there was a geneticist. His name was Donald Yates, and he began a case study um, where he said, we want to look at the genetics going all the way back to about 1700, because they were able to exhume bones and take DNA off of the bones, as
Right.
well as current tribe members. And he did, I think it's somewhere in the range of like 12,000 DNA studies of this
Wow.
particular group. It's a massive number. And what he discovers is that they can be traced to Southeast Asia, 27% coming from the Middle East, which would be Southeast Asia, because we have to remember the Middle
Yeah.
East is actually considered to be Asia,
Right.
particularly from the areas of Israel and Phoenicia, with another
Wow.
10% coming from the Middle East and North Africa, being Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan.
Wow.
So he's saying 37% of their DNA comes from the Middle East,
Mm.
which matches their story. We came from somewhere over here, we came across the Great Ocean, and we arrived here, which to me is like, just blows my mind. In the process of doing that, Abraham Lincoln's mother had been exhumed to be buried closer to where her son is, um,
Uh-huh.
in his grave. And so when they exhumed her body, they gave him part of her DNA as well to study. And what they discovered is that she had always claimed that she was Native American. Um, and her DNA matches up with the Cherokee DNA for the time period almost exactly,
Wow.
which would make him the first minority in the United States to hold a rank of any kind in the United States.
So he's
During
half
the time period,
Cherokee.
because he would have been partially Cherokee. Yeah,
Yeah.
which to me just fascinates me completely. It's like, whoa, wait, particularly from the fact that he comes from the Appalachian Mountain regions
Yeah.
in Kentucky, um, which was like, this is great. There is a spokesperson currently with the Cherokee tribe. She says that if this DNA evidence is exact and if it's right, that makes the Cherokee one of the oldest human populations in the world.
Wow.
She would be correct.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Because you have to
And
remember, they still considered the Hebrews one of the oldest cultures in the world. So that would put them as
mhm.
one of the oldest cultures in the world, which to me is like just mind blowing in a lot of ways. Um,
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned this book earlier. If you want to go into that,
we're going to jump into this book here real quick because this
yeah,
is actually, you found this one.
I found this in a video, YouTube video. I honestly, I wish I could say I recommend the video, but for the information, yes. And I didn't write down who did it, but I could find it easily. But anyway, this man, can y'all read that? I can't see the name on it. Um,
We're looking at,
James Van Norden. I expanded it in 1837. Wrote this. Um, discourse on the evidences of the American Indians being the descendants of the lost tribes of Israel, delivered before the Mercantile Library Association, Clinton Hall, by, well, actually, M. Noah. That's who did it. It was published in 1837 by the Norden feller. But what he's doing here is in 1837 making a case that the Indians, in particular the Cherokee, were actually the lost tribes. We're not going to go into the whole article, but look at this. This is why. First, their belief in one God. Two, their computation of time by their ceremonies of the new moon. And three, in their divisions of the year in four seasons, answering, and Tim's already mentioned this, to the Jewish festivals of the Feast of Flowers, the Day of Atonement, Feast of the Tabernacle, and other religious holidays. But get this next one here. In the erection of a temple after the manner of our temple, and having an ark of the covenant,
right,
and also the erection of altars, by the division of the nation into tribes, with the chief or grand sacrament at their head, by their laws of sacrifices, evolutions, marriages, ceremonies, war and peace, prohibitions, eating certain things,
right,
fully carrying out the Mosaic institutions. But that he says they have made their own Ark of the Covenant, or had. It didn't say they made it, but they have an Ark of the Covenant. This was in 1837.
right. Which
And
is
you talked
interesting
about the legend of the, people showing up with the Ark. Maybe
right?
that's how they got it.
Because one of the Cherokee legends is they came with a golden box that was
Right,
carried on long poles when they came across the ocean. So, in other
right,
words, here they are. They've got some large box that is made of gold that they're carrying on large poles that they brought with them the entire way. And of course,
right,
he goes, okay, they've got an Ark of the Covenant, which to me was absolutely fascinating to see that particular portion of it to go, okay, wait,
right.
now we've got somebody even earlier than current ones because, of course, when I went to
Yeah.
go find my original article, I couldn't find it. And instead, I found Strange Journeys. We're going to talk about the
He did a search of the Cherokee and the Ark of the Covenant and found
right,
this show.
right,
Well,
exactly.
let me say this before we go on. I state in our disclaimer on every show that we will respect individual beliefs. We are not saying emphatically that the Cherokee are the
Right,
lost tribes, that there's a possibility here. We're not saying emphatically that they had the Ark of the Covenant. We're just saying it's ironic and it's wild that everything, it's I don't know, serendipitous or parallel. I don't know, but there's a lot of stuff here to think about. But we can't. I mean, there's no way we can say emphatically one way or the other. We don't know, and we research and we can dig and we can find out all this interesting, strange stuff that we love to investigate. I just want to put that
right.
disclaimer in there. We're not stating, yes, this is the way it is. We're enjoying the subject as
Right,
in the possibility.
right, exactly. Exactly. And one of the things that really kind of blows my mind about this is the idea that what happens with this box is the Cherokee say they split into two tribes at that point, and part of them go north with this box because they feel it is too dangerous to keep among their villages.
Wow.
Now, what ties this into me is that the Dighton Rock would be to the north. And
True.
we've got Phoenician writing and Cherokee writing on the Dighton Rock, as well as the carving of what they think is the Ark of the Covenant on the Dighton Rock. And the Dighton
Huh.
Rock, most people don't realize this. This is a landmark. Everybody was using this thing. Everybody that explored the
Right.
United States in the early portions was using this as a landmark in the river, and they were carving into it to say, "We were here," or "Here's how you're going to get to this place," or "Here's where you're going to go to this direction. Here are your directions." So it
Joe
was a
loves
land.
Mary forever.
Yes, exactly. So they knew it was going to be there as this. And so to me, I was like, okay, it's fantastic that this thing is up there. Like I said, the number of inscriptions on this rock is just immense. Um,
Wow.
but most historians, however, claim that the Phoenician writing and the other writings on this rock are just coincidence. It
Oh,
just sort of happened. It's
oops.
taken thousands of years for all this writing to get there. Okay, explain to me how Phoenician writing, which is now a dead language for the most part, is on a rock. You know, 800 years after Phoenician Empire is gone.
Right.
Where did it come from? How did it get to be there? Um, you
Yeah, I
know,
doubt anybody be writing Joe is here in Phoenician,
right.
100 years ago.
You
I
um, yeah. Explain to me how Cherokee writing is on there when the Cherokees are much further south still at this point. Um,
yeah. Wow.
but
Supposedly.
right, supposedly at this point they're much further south. Now there is an interesting tie with that. We talked just a moment about Creek Stone, and this is actually the Bat Creek Stone as it was found. 1891 is when they dig this thing up. So
Oh,
it's
yeah.
been around a little while now. It's got an interesting series of carvings on it. I'm looking to see. I actually have somewhere here exactly what it says. Um,
Now, is this the one that it was flipped upside down?
it was flipped
They
upside down inside of a burial mound.
Right, but I
Discovered
mean, when they first looked at it, they were looking at it, didn't realize it was upside down until a Hebrew
right,
scholar
right,
looked at it and said, "That's upside down."
yeah, and his name was John W. Emmert in 1889. He discovered these. He says you've got it upside down, but you guys are never going to believe this. It's Cherokee writing. And here he's a Hebrew scholar. He says,
Yeah.
no, this is actually Cherokee writing. Um, and he then says, okay, it's Cherokee. That's what it is. We're going to look at it. We're going to consider it Cherokee. Then in 1971, this archaeologist out of the Smithsonian Institute examines the stone, and he claims that it is Paleo Hebrew dating to about 1 BC.
Mm.
Um, and I'm thinking, okay, well, where'd you come up with the Paleo Hebrew? Um, and so I did some research on that, and it's interesting because this is Paleo Hebrew dating back to about 500 BC. You
I
can
heard
see
them talking
the
about
very
that on a couple of documentaries.
right. You can see the one that is closest to the left of the screen, or I guess probably to the right of the screen as you're looking at it, is actually biblical Hebrew. The other is actually how they would have written those letters by hand.
Oh,
Right next to it, there towards the middle. This is Cherokee. And there's one little letter here in particular that catches up, and it's the letter C, S-E, that matches almost exactly with the Hebrew for the same letter. Um, and they actually call it Zeb, is the letter in Hebrew. It's almost the exact same way that it's written. The letters almost match completely back and forth between the two. I wish somebody had taken the time with the Cherokee to do it as handwritten so we
yeah,
could see what it would look like in hand instead of this is done by some computer program they're using.
yeah. Put that back up, that other one.
You know,
Now, which one is it?
you're looking at, let me see, you're looking at, I think it's seven from the bottom. Um, looks like a number 7 in the biblical Hebrew, but it's almost the exact same letter in the way that it's done. And it's done with, um, I'm trying to think, what they do is they actually take a circle and they make two circles and then draw a line back down, is how it's done in the Hebrew. And it's almost done the exact same way in the Cherokee, where they've taken two circles and made a loop at the bottom where it looks kind of like an odd looking T, is the way it looks. So it's got two circles, a loop, and then another circle at the top to make that
Well,
observation.
on the other one, you're talking about that letter on the bottom.
Almost to the bottom. Yeah, it's like, see, I wish I could, I need to blow this up.
Blow it up. Just blow it up.
Right.
You can go full screen on that. I had to do it on mine so I could get a closer look.
I'm looking at this here real quick for you.
Okay.
We call it pre-sulfate. It looks almost like a 7 under the biblical Greek, and then when you move, or biblical Hebrew, and then when you move over, it actually looks like a T with a circle. They bring it up to a T and then loop it back down. It matches almost completely when they handwrite them the way that they've done them. So it's
Okay,
kind
like
of
this
interesting.
Zadi Safit.
Right.
Okay, I see that down at the bottom.
Pull up the biblical.
Wow. That's
And so
wild.
if you were actually to match the two, there are several scholars that say these letters would be the exact same if the Cherokee
Hmm.
had been written by hand and not by a computer, that the lettering would be almost exactly the same. Now, the interesting part about this is that in 1970, there's this scholar, and we discussed him for just a moment. What happens is he's with the Smithsonian Institute, and he goes, "Nope, this is actually going to be Paleo Hebrew. It's so the entire stone is a hoax. Hebrew, the Cherokee language
Yeah.
written is not even written until 1819. Um, but interestingly enough, in both the Cherokee and in the Hebrew, those letters represent on the Back Creek stone represent holiness to the Lord,
Wow.
and it means the same thing in both their languages, holiness to the Lord. So that, so it matches up with both languages, which I thought was phenomenal to go. Okay, wait a second, here's this group. We've got the similarity in writing to the point that even scholars are going, oh, well, this is Hebrew, and other ones are going, no, this is actually going to be Cherokee writing. So there is
Well,
a
in
combination.
in the ancient Hebrew, the word for God was the YHWH or Yahweh.
For,
Um, and and I was one of the documentaries I was watching today. Some of the Cherokee words for God, like praising God or thanking God, it had that Yah as
right,
part of the word.
right. In
Same
fact,
root base.
right, exactly. Um, so you do have this very similar things going on. The Cherokees believe that God is a three-in-one being, um,
That
much
sounds
like
familiar.
right, doesn't it? Though I mean, that's exactly what the Jews believe. The Jews believe that God is a three-in-one. In the Cherokee, the three are the Father or Creator, being Yahalo Takwa, the Son or Uniter, being Yatena T,
There's that Yah.
yep, and then the Great Spirit, Uskwa Ula, is what they call the Great Spirit. And even that matches up with biblical Hebrew
Wow.
because the Spirit is considered Uskwa. So you've got
Hmm.
some very similar things that are happening here. And it continues throughout their legends because, according to them, the three create the first Cherokee man or the hunter and the first Cherokee woman, otherwise called Corn Woman. Um, and interestingly enough, Corn Woman is then bitten by an evil snake, bringing death to all Cherokee from that point forward.
I
Sounds
think I've
familiar.
heard that. I think I've heard that somewhere before.
And I was like, well, wait a second. How in
Jeez,
the
where did I hear that?
yeah? I think we've heard that particular one as well. Um,
Well, the
and then
biting part, not necessarily, but just it's like, what? Wait a
yeah,
minute.
even their legend of the Great Flood. Every culture out there at this point, or most cultures, have a legend of a great flood that occurred.
Wow.
And the Cherokee's legend is very similar. In the Cherokee legend, this is actually what the Cherokee legend says. A long time ago, a man had a dog, and the dog would go down to the river and stare into the water and howl. The man became angry and scolded the dog, but the dog spoke to the man and told him that a great flood was coming, which
Oh,
would be a freshet, a resetting of the world, destroying every living thing in the world. If the man wanted to be saved, he must build himself a raft. When the rains came, the man was to take his family and climb aboard the raft, and other animals would join him there to survive the flooding.
wow.
The man doubted the dog but built the raft anyway. When the rains finally came, the man and his family climbed onto the raft. Animals came and joined them on the raft. The rain lasted for days and days to the point that it covered the tops of the mountains. And when the rains finally stopped, no man existed except for those on the raft.
Wow.
They searched for land, but no land could be found. Until one day the man heard a strange singing and dancing coming from the other side of a ridge of land that was sticking up out of the water. He climbed to the top of the ridge and saw bones dancing. He knew then that the ghost who had that this was the ghost of those who had perished in the flood. He also somehow knew that there would never be a flood of its time to come again.
Wow. Yeah, I think I remember some of those salient points, and not from
Right,
a movie.
right,
I
exactly. Um,
think I've read that somewhere before, something very similar.
right,
Wow.
and
I
so
mean,
the man,
I know that all most major cultures throughout the world have a flood story. They
right,
call it a flood myth. But I mean, I think there's also been geological evidence as they've dug down and found layers. They can find where the flood actually happened. It was a geological event that is evidenced by the strata in the Earth's crust. They can see when it happened. But I mean, everybody, the Sumerians have a
right,
flood story. The we were talking about the Aztecs,
yeah,
the Incas, they all have flood stories. So, wow.
yeah. The Navajo have a flood story. Their flood story is that the gods flooded the world and that they escaped through the top of a hole in the kiva to come to the fourth world. This is the fourth world, according to them. But it still revolves around here's this great flood where everybody
Right.
dies for those who get away because the gods allow them to get away,
Hmm.
which to me was absolutely mind blowing to have heard that. But I thought it was really great. As you were looking at that book, and we'll go back to this one here in particular, it said that the belief in the one God,
Yeah.
and that God is a triune God. The, the
Yeah.
Cherokee believe that God is three in one. The Jews believe that God is three in one. And then you go down and it says that the time of their ceremonies coincide with the new moon, and then the festivals match up as well. And that was what
Right.
caught my attention was how those festivals matched up. Um, because I was amazed as I was looking at this, because just like you, I've been fascinated with this for the past few days and even longer as I've been looking at some of this. The celebration of the first full moon of spring falls on the exact same day of the Passover each year. Um, the same day the
Yeah.
Jews are celebrating the Passover, they're celebrating the first day of spring. Um, let's see here. You also have the Great New Moon Feast, which is celebrated as the day that the earth was created,
Wow.
according to um, the Cherokee, falls on the same at the same time as Rosh Hashanah.
Wow.
Um, the commentation ceremony is a day that one soul is cleansed. This is according to the Cherokee from sin, and that they join the community to celebrate with a unity with the Creator, and it falls on the same day as the Day of Atonement in the Jewish religion.
Hmm.
Um, which to me was like, okay, wait, the Jews believe, okay, if you what they would, those that don't know the history of the Day of Atonement, the Jews would gather in Jerusalem, and they would take two goats out, and they would present these two goats, and they would say, this one's going to carry the sin, or this one's going to be our sacrifice. Which one do you want? And they would say, okay, we're going to put all the sin on this one, and we're going to send it out into the wilderness, and we're going to sacrifice this one. And that's what the Day of Atonement was, as they were getting
Yeah.
rid of their sin. The Cherokee celebrate that through sacrifice as well. We're
Right.
going to allow something to leave our villages and to become its own thing, and it's going to go off by itself with all of our sin, and then we're going to sacrifice something else in its place.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
which matches up almost entirely with what the Jewish thing is. Finally, in the Cherokee religion, teens are considered to become adults at the age of 13, the same age that Jewish young men and women are bar mitzvah. Um,
Wow.
and this goes back centuries that they've been doing this.
Yeah.
So there's so many tie-ins with who they are. That just fascinated me to the point that I was like, wow, this is amazing. I know they're not the only ones that are out there.
Right.
Um,
Now, Lynn made a comment on here. She got back in a little while ago and is watching. She said that she thinks that all land was connected until the flood. Then the receding of the water, the land broke up and
that
everything
can,
moved to its current location. I mean, that's a theory that
right,
it's like a big giant puzzle. All these pieces were together on
right,
the earth, and then something split them all apart. Maybe that's what did it. But I think the 10 tribes were lost well after that.
right.
So so
And it is interesting because uh, most people don't catch it, but the Bible does not talk about rain until the flood. Cherokee religion
true.
does not talk about rain until the flood. There's
Huh.
no record of rain in either one of them until the flood occurs. So it's like, well, what's rain?
Well, there was a theory, and I think it's in if I remember correctly, there was actually a verse of scripture in Genesis there that says that the springs of the earth would open up and spread a mist
Right.
over the land, and that's how everything got watered.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe there weren't any clouds,
That could be. So
you know, unless except when this mist would spray up. I in the dark recesses of my memory, I seem to remember that from a verse in the Bible.
right. Yeah.
All right.
That that the earth split open and that there was mists that came out and helped with the flood as well.
Right.
Developed the clouds
Oh,
that
that's
developed.
what it was.
Right.
It was because I was thinking of I was thinking earlier that they talked about a mist coming up to water the land. But anyway, I've been wrong before, and
Right.
that's not the first time. Won't be the last either. That's why we do this so we can learn new stuff.
Exactly.
All right, and you want to go back to the ark?
Basically, what happens with the Cherokee religion is, like I said, this box goes north. Um, the Pueblos say that it came from somewhere to the east with the Native Americans. So to me, it kind of ties it all together. How is all this moving
Uh
around?
huh.
I know that Josh Gates in his show talks about going, and he wants to look for the Ark of the Covenant inside the Grand Canyon, and they won't let him because they won't let the helicopters go down below the rim of the
Yeah.
canyon. You know, because that's one of the things that he's told. It's inside the canyon. So to me, it's like, okay, you know, who really has it? Does it still exist? Are we going to continue looking for it for nothing or what? You know, I, honestly, I'd love to see what our viewers have to say about it in the next few weeks and tell us what they think and what their theories are as well. Um, what they think even about today's show, especially where we've started tying in ancient civilizations with
Yeah.
American civilizations.
Well, you just reminded me. There's one thing I did not come across. I came across the possibility, like we've talked about, the Cherokee had the Ark of the Covenant,
Right.
but there I didn't find anything about them having kept it.
Right.
That it's still hidden in this cave or this mesa or whatever out west, or
Right.
down in the put in the swamp in South Florida, the Okefenokee. That just talks about them having had it in the past,
Right.
but
And the
nothing.
only point that I find it reference to is that at some point the tribe splits and part of them take it north to get away from the villages. Um, and maybe what's happening is the society is growing as a population, and they've
Mhm.
decided this thing is far too dangerous to have sitting amongst their villages. So maybe it's better if we send it to another place. And maybe it does go as far north as Massachusetts, maybe even further,
Yeah.
and then moves west with it. Because how would you get a group of Pueblo Indians carving an image like that one that we showed just a little ago, the image
Right.
from from
Yep.
the painted desert into the rocks, and going, here was this thing that was carried on two long wooden poles by men made out of gold.
Right.
It shot lightning.
Well, and going back, Lynn made another comment that that famous story about Noah getting drunk on the
Right,
wine that had fermented, that the
right,
atmosphere had changed.
right,
They didn't know what fermentation was.
exactly.
So, supposedly, I'm assuming that's what happened. That's the point of it, that the atmosphere changed. It caused the atmosphere to change, and so it caused it to ferment. So what he had normally been drinking, just grape juice, was now wine.
Right,
Good excuse anyway to the wife. Say, honey, that
yeah,
was grape juice when we started.
right,
It
exactly.
kind of like Jesus turning the water into wine. I was drinking water. I swear, I was drinking
Right,
water. So,
yeah.
all right, yeah. What do y'all think, Selena? Your thoughts? Let me unmute you. Okay.
I think it's all very fascinating because I'm part Cherokee and I didn't know anything about this. I mean, I didn't know that Cherokee's language was not recognized until the 1800s. I just assumed it had always been recognized.
Yeah.
Right,
And where it had come, the Cherokees possibly coming from across the world, that's amazing to me. It's just all very interesting to me, and I'd like to learn more.
Oh
I
wow.
really, really enjoyed this. It's really fascinating to me.
Yeah. Well, I say there's a ton of YouTube videos. There's really not. There's just from a few folks. Before we close out, I want to bring this up. Where's this? The Alabama tribe of the. Oh, where'd it go? I had it right here. That's not it. Yeah, I found an article online. If it would load up,
right.
because I didn't add it into the notes, but it's the Alabama Cherokee tribe recognizes Jerusalem as Israel's eternal undivided capital. Tell you what, let me just share this page with you real quick. Where did it go? Yeah, there it is. Share the screen. Okay. The Alabama, this is from 2021, just last year, a little over a year ago. IsraelHayam.com. Alabama Cherokee tribe recognizes Jerusalem as Israel's eternal undivided capital. We have chosen to identify with a people as a people, says Chief Larry Smith of the Northeast Alabama Cherokee. They held a ceremony in Gunnersville. That this resolution was unanimously passed by the tribal council, recognizing the sovereign Jewish nation of Israel with Jerusalem as its eternal undivided capital. We view our full support in pursuit of the peace of Jerusalem and the nation of Israel by whichever means necessary. Um, Again, we have chosen to identify. Chief Larry Smith began his remarks by noting that if there is a people that can understand how the Jews feel, it's the Cherokee, which received an amen from the audience. And down here, some historians even argue that we can find our DNA roots in Israel. He says, I'm not saying that's true.
Right.
Are we the 10 lost tribes of Israel? Debatable. But there are so many of our ceremonies, so many of our celebrations that coincide with Jewish traditions and Jewish holidays. That is from Chief Larry Smith of the
Wow.
Alabama Cherokee Indians. He's acknowledging the fact that there's a possibility there, you know,
Right. Yeah.
that they have central ancestors, uh, similar ancestry. So anyway, that's just wow, amazing. Anything else, Selena?
No, I just, like I said, I just think it's very fascinating.
I
And I
know.
am
Well, like I
one.
said, I just went on YouTube and did Cherokee and the Ark of the Covenant, or Cherokee and the Hebrew, or and there's several things on there. Some of them where I stole that picture of that book from 1837. You know, I mean, it's amazing to think about the possibilities. Could it be? You know, I mean, we brought up the Smithsonian a couple times, and a couple times they were like, "Yes," and blah, blah, they were like, "No." And we've been telling you since this new season started. I wanted to do a show on Smithsonian cover-ups. Is there a conspiracy there? Well, during my research on this, and I don't have all the details because we're not doing the Smithsonian show. I found out there was a speech given by one of the founders of the Smithsonian saying that they would focus on Columbus's discovery and forward.
Right.
So, if it's not Columbus, if it's not European, the Smithsonian, in the very foundation of their uh, organization, whatever it is, they stated that this is it. If we find anything older, it gets covered up. They didn't say that, but that's what's happened.
Right.
You know, and we've already got the research started on that. Um, that could probably be a whole podcast in itself. Just talk because in the Grand Canyon, we were talking about the Grand Canyon a minute ago. In the Grand
Yeah.
Canyon, there's a newspaper article, a local newspaper article from that time saying they found a cave full of not Egyptian artifacts, but Egyptian like artifacts, and it's being collected to be studied by representatives from the Smithsonian. And guess what was never heard from again? How
Yeah.
many stories of giants have we heard about? Well, it's being collected and checked out by the Smithsonian, and we never hear about it again. So there you go. I don't know. We'll get there one day. That may be a big one that we have to hold off. I don't know. But with my situation, I get on here when I can. I appreciate y'all watching, the ones that have stuck with us tonight for almost an hour and 20 minutes. Tim, any final words?
I'm going to just keep researching this. It's been a lot of fun so far. So I'm looking forward to our next show.
It has. Thank you for bringing this one to us. This is awesome. And he was going to do this show for y'all last week by himself because I wasn't able to be there, and then he got put in the hospital. It was there 2 or 3 days. I'm glad he's better. We're glad you're feeling better. So, watchers,
Yeah.
we'll see you when we see you with our next show. So, on your strange journeys, please stay safe. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.